When life throws us into a storm of negative emotions, most people believe they have to wait weeks, months, or even years to feel whole again. They think the healing process is a long, drawn-out journey, almost like climbing a mountain with no visible peak. But what if I told you that in just 3 days, you could dramatically shift the way you feel, think, and act? 3 days, 72 hours. That's all it takes to begin a complete emotional reset. Not because the world around you changes, but because you choose to change the way you respond to it. The human mind is far more adaptable than most people give it credit for. It's designed to form habits quickly when given clear, repeated instructions. And when you dedicate 3 consecutive days to reprogramming your thoughts, you start sending your mind a message. This is the new direction. This is the new me. The truth is, the first day is the hardest. On day 1, you're breaking the inertia of your old emotional state. You've been carrying certain feelings, resentment, frustration, doubt, for so long that they've become familiar. Your mind resists change, not because it's impossible, but because it fears the unfamiliar. So on that first day, you may feel like you're pushing against an invisible wall. Negative thoughts will try to sneak back in, whispering, "What's the point? This won't work." But this is exactly when you must stand firm and remind yourself why you're doing this. The first day is about confronting the raw weight of your emotional patterns and refusing to let them dominate you any longer. It's about planting your flag in the ground and declaring, "Enough. I'm taking my power back." By day 2, something subtle begins to happen. The heaviness starts to loosen its grip, even if just a little. It's not that the negative feelings vanish overnight, but you begin to notice moments, small pockets of peace, that weren't there before. You might wake up with a slightly lighter heart. You might find yourself smiling at something you would have ignored just days ago. This is the mind's way of testing the new program you're installing. Your subconscious begins to say, "Maybe this new pattern is worth keeping." The key here is consistency. If on day 2 you slip back into old habits, you send a mixed signal to your mind, and it reverts to what's comfortable. But if you stay the course, repeating empowering thoughts, redirecting your focus, and refusing to dwell on what drags you down, you strengthen the emotional reset you began on day 1. By the 3rd day, you're stepping into a different emotional frequency. You feel the difference in your body, your posture, even your voice. You start to notice that the same situations which triggered you earlier in the week no longer hold the same power. It's not that the problems disappeared, it's that you changed. Your perspective has shifted. You've proven to yourself that you are not at the mercy of your emotions. You are the architect of them. 3 days of relentless focus has given your brain enough repetition to form the beginnings of a new habit. Science tells us that neural pathways strengthen through repetition, and in just 72 hours of directed thought, you've already begun to carve a new mental pathway, one that leads toward resilience, not despair. The reason this works so quickly is because of immersion. For 3 days, you're not dabbling in positivity, you're immersing yourself in it. You're choosing every thought with intention, filtering what you listen to, what you watch, and even who you speak to. You're surrounding yourself with reminders of the mind set you want to embody. It's like stepping into a mental boot camp. And just like a muscle that grows stronger with focused, consistent exercise, your emotional state becomes more stable and powerful when trained with intensity over a short, concentrated period. Most people never give themselves the gift of this kind of short, intense reset. They wait for the world to change before they allow themselves to feel better. They wait for circumstances to align, for people to apologize, for luck to turn in their favor. But those who take control understand that waiting is just another way of staying stuck. In 3 days, you can disrupt years of negative conditioning simply by deciding that the next 72 hours will be lived with absolute discipline over your focus. You don't argue with the negative feelings, you don't wrestle with them. You simply redirect your attention every time they appear, over and over, without exception. It's important to remember that these 3 days are not about pretending bad things don't exist. They're about reclaiming the authority over how you feel in spite of them. When you commit to 3 days of an emotional reset, you're telling your mind, I choose what gets my energy. This clarity creates a mental shift that most people never experience because they're too used to letting emotions dictate their days instead of the other way around. And while 3 days might sound too short to create real change, it's exactly the kind of time frame that shocks your system out of complacency. You bypass the endless someday I'll feel better cycle and step directly into action now. Most people live their lives without truly paying attention to the thoughts and emotions that run through their minds each day. They operate on autopilot, reacting to situations in the same old ways they always have, not realizing that their patterns are quietly shaping the quality of their lives. Awareness changes everything. The instant you become aware of what you are thinking and feeling, you create a gap between the emotion and the reaction. That gap is where your power lies. Without awareness, you're a passenger in your own life, being driven by past conditioning, old fears, and limiting beliefs. With awareness, you move into the driver's seat. You're no longer swept away by the tide of negative feelings. You can see them for what they are, temporary mental states, not unshakable truths. Awareness is like turning on the lights in a dark room. When you're unaware, the room feels full of shadows, and your mind fills in the gaps with fear and assumptions. But when you flip the switch, you see things clearly for what they are. You notice the exact thoughts that make you anxious. You catch the moments when you tell yourself a story that makes you angry. You see the pattern of how one small frustration in the morning can snowball into a bad day because you didn't stop to recognize the moment it began. This is why awareness is such a powerful first victory. It's not yet the change itself, but it's the point at which change becomes possible. The challenge is that most negative feelings thrive in secrecy. They hide beneath the surface, operating in the background while you go about your day. You might find yourself snapping at someone without realizing you were already carrying tension from a completely different event. You might procrastinate on an important task, telling yourself you're just tired, when in reality you're feeling insecure about your ability to do it well. Awareness strips away the excuses and reveals the real cause. When you can look directly at your own inner state and say, I'm feeling resentment right now, or I'm choosing fear over action, you take the first step in breaking its control over you. Becoming aware doesn't mean you instantly feel better. It means you stop lying to yourself about what's going on inside you. There's a certain honesty to it. Instead of telling yourself that you're in a bad mood for no reason, you dig deeper and see the thoughts feeding it. Maybe you've been replaying a conversation in your mind where you felt disrespected. Maybe you've been comparing yourself to someone else all morning without realizing it. Once you see it, you can do something about it. Without awareness, you would have stayed stuck in the mood with no understanding of where it came from. leaving you powerless to change it. The beauty of awareness is that it's always available to you. No matter how far down the spiral of negativity you've gone, the moment you recognize what's happening, you have already begun to shift direction. This is why it's such a victory. It doesn't require perfect timing or a special environment. It can happen in the middle of an argument, during your commute, or while sitting alone at night. All it takes is the willingness to stop for a moment and look at yourself from the outside, to observe your own mind as if you were watching someone else. This is the beginning of mastery over your emotions. Think about the way most people handle their feelings. They either suppress them, pretending nothing is wrong, or they explode, letting the feelings control every word and action. Neither approach works in the long term. Suppression only buries the emotion deeper, allowing it to resurface later with more intensity. Explosion creates regret and damages relationships. Awareness offers a third path. Acknowledge the emotion without letting it run the show. You say, "I see you, I know you're here, but you don't get to steer my life." That simple mental stance transforms the way you handle challenges. One of the most empowering things about awareness is that it reveals choice where you thought there was none. Before awareness, it feels like negative feelings just happen to you, like weather you can't control. After awareness, you realize you have the ability to decide how to respond, even if you can't control the initial emotion. You might not choose the storm, but you can choose whether to open an umbrella or just stand there getting drenched. This choice is the foundation for overcoming negativity. Without awareness, you don't even know you're standing in the rain. You just feel cold and miserable without knowing why. Developing awareness takes practice. You have to train yourself to pause before reacting, to check in with your own mind throughout the day. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Where is this coming from? Is this the state I want to stay in? At first, it might feel awkward or forced, but with repetition, it becomes second nature. Eventually, you start noticing your inner state as easily as you notice the temperature outside. You begin to catch the small triggers before they grow into bigger problems. That's when you realize how much control you've always had. You just hadn't been paying attention. Awareness is the first victory because it opens the door to every other victory that follows. You cannot replace a negative feeling with a positive one if you don't know the negative feeling is there. You cannot take deliberate action to shift your state if you don't realize you've fallen into an unhelpful pattern. Once you become aware, you can begin the real work of change. And while awareness alone won't solve everything, it's the moment where you stop being a passive participant in your life and start becoming the conscious creator of it. When a negative feeling takes hold, most people instinctively try to fight it. They argue with themselves, telling the feeling to go away, or they push it down, pretending it doesn't exist. But what you resist often persists. Negative energy doesn't dissolve simply because you wrestle with it. It often grows stronger because your focus keeps feeding it. The most effective way to release a negative feeling is not by attacking it, but by replacing it with its direct positive opposite. This is a conscious act, a deliberate shift in focus that transforms the emotional state from the inside out. If fear has its grip on you, you replace it with confidence. If doubt is whispering in your ear, you answer with faith. If worry is weighing on you, you lift it with gratitude. The human mind cannot hold two opposing emotions with equal strength at the same time. Whichever one you feed will dominate. This replacement process begins with recognition. You first identify the negative feeling, clearly naming it without judgment. Once you can say, "I'm feeling anxious," or "I'm feeling discouraged," you take the next step of asking, "What is the exact opposite state I want to feel right now?" This is not about pretending the problem doesn't exist. It's about deciding that your inner state will not be dictated by it. For example, if you feel insecurity creeping in before an important meeting, the opposite state you want might be certainty. Your job in that moment is to deliberately engage in thoughts, memories, or images that generate certainty, even if it feels unnatural at first. The mind responds to focus like a camera lens where you aim it. The image becomes sharper and more vivid. If you aim it at the negative feeling, it becomes more real and influential. If you aim it at its opposite, the negative begins to blur and lose power. Think of it like changing the channel on a radio. If one station is playing static and noise, you don't stand there trying to fix the static. You switch to a station playing the kind of music you want to hear. Emotional replacement works the same way. You stop pouring attention into the unwanted signal and tune into the one that uplifts you. Some people misunderstand this and think it means ignoring reality. It's not about denial. It's about choosing the state of mind that will help you face reality more effectively. A person who replaces fear with courage doesn't pretend there's no danger. They simply decide to approach it with the strength to act. Someone who replaces resentment with compassion isn't excusing bad behavior. They're protecting themselves from the poison of holding on to bitterness. The replacement isn't an escape from life. It's a way to step into it with more power. This approach is deeply connected to the way our brains process thoughts and emotions. Neurons that fire together wire together, meaning the more you practice moving from a negative state to its positive opposite, the faster and more naturally your mind will make that shift in the future. At first, it may feel like an uphill battle. If you've been living in a state of doubt for years, replacing it with faith might feel almost impossible in the beginning. But with repetition, you carve a new mental pathway, and eventually the positive response becomes your default. One practical way to make this shift is through emotional triggers you prepare in advance. These can be words, images, songs, or memories that instantly evoke the positive opposite of your most common negative feelings. For example, if worry is your usual challenge, you might keep a short list of past moments where everything worked out better than expected. When worry rises, you deliberately review that list and let those memories flood your mind. If fear is your challenge, you might keep a mantra or affirmation that instantly reminds you of your strength. Over time, these triggers become shortcuts to the emotional states you want to live in. Replacing the negative with the positive opposite also changes the way you interact with other people. If someone approaches you with anger, the usual reaction is to meet anger with anger, which only escalates the situation. But if you consciously choose to meet anger with calm, you not only protect your own state, but often diffuse the other person's as well. This is one of the most powerful demonstrations of emotional leadership, responding in a way that elevates the energy of the interaction instead of matching the negativity presented to you. It's important to understand that this is not about forcing yourself to feel something you don't. It's about choosing the thoughts and actions that generate the positive emotion until it naturally replaces the negative one. Feelings are often the result of repeated focus. If you've been thinking fearful thoughts, you feel fear. If you think confident thoughts, you feel confidence. By shifting focus, you shift feeling, And because your actions follow your feelings, this single change can alter the entire outcome of your day. This method also teaches you an important truth. You are never powerless against your emotions. You may not control when they show up, but you always control whether they stay. The act of replacing them is proof of that control. Every time you make the switch, you strengthen your ability to guide your own inner state. Over time, the negative feelings still arrive from time to time, but they no longer linger. They pass through like clouds instead of becoming storms. The habit of replacing them becomes second nature, and you begin to experience life from a place of choice instead of reaction. When you find yourself trapped in a cycle of negative emotions, it's easy to believe you need some grand, life-changing action to break free. People imagine they have to move to a new city, quit their job, or completely reinvent themselves to feel better. But the truth is, the shift begins with something much smaller: micro-actions. These are deliberate, intentional steps so simple that they seem almost too small to matter. Yet their power lies in their consistency and their ability to interrupt the spiral. Negative feelings feed on momentum. Once they start, they can quickly gather force, dragging you deeper into frustration, anxiety, or hopelessness. Micro-actions break that momentum by creating little wins that signal to your brain, things are changing. A micro-action could be as simple as standing up and stretching after sitting in the same spot for hours. It could be taking a short walk outside and letting sunlight hit your face. It could be sending a text of gratitude to someone you appreciate, or taking 5 minutes to write down what you're thankful for in a notebook. The beauty of these actions is that they are easy enough to do even when you feel low. In fact, the smaller they are, the less resistance you feel toward doing them, which means you're more likely to follow through. That follow-through is the first crack in the wall of negativity. When you commit to 3 days of overcoming negative feelings, micro-actions become your primary tools. Each one is like a match that lights a small flame of progress. One match on its own doesn't seem like much, but if you keep striking them, the room starts to glow. For example, imagine you wake up feeling heavy and unmotivated. Instead of waiting for the perfect burst of inspiration to strike, you decide to do just one positive thing. Maybe it's making your bed or listening to a motivational clip for 5 minutes. That single action shifts your internal state just enough to make the next action easier. Soon you've stacked 2 or 3 wins before the day even gets going. These small actions work on a psychological level because they give you quick evidence that you're not stuck. Negative feelings often convince you that you're powerless, that there's nothing you can do to change the way you feel. A micro-action is proof that this isn't true. It's physical evidence that you can act in spite of how you feel. This builds self-trust, and self-trust is one of the most powerful antidotes to negativity. The moment you prove to yourself, I can still move forward, the grip of the negative emotion begins to loosen. Micro-actions also work because they're rooted in the principle of state change. Your mental and emotional state is tied to your body's movement, your breathing, your environment, and your focus. Change any one of those and you begin to change your state. Something as small as taking a deep, intentional breath or shifting your posture can send a signal to your brain that you're in control. Over time, these small state shifts add up, making it harder for negative feelings to dominate your entire day. The cumulative effect is where the real magic happens. One deep breath won't transform your life, but 100 deep breaths taken in moments of stress over 3 days can create a noticeable shift in your emotional baseline. Writing down 3 things you're grateful for one time won't rewire your brain, but doing it morning and night for 72 hours will start to train your mind to scan for the positive instead of dwelling on the negative. The repetition of micro actions is what turns them into habits, and once something becomes a habit, it no longer requires willpower, it becomes part of who you are. Another key aspect of microactions is their ability to interrupt thought patterns. Negative feelings are often fueled by loops of repetitive thinking. You replay a conversation that upset you, or you imagine worst-case scenarios over and over again. Each repetition strengthens the feeling. But if you insert a small action like standing up and getting a glass of water, putting on a piece of uplifting music, or focusing on a breathing exercise, you disrupt the loop. It's like taking a stick and jamming it into the gears of a machine so it can't keep running. Even if the negative thought tries to return, it's weakened because you broke its rhythm. It's important to remember that microactions don't have to feel monumental to be effective. In fact, the less overwhelming they are, the more powerful they can be, because they get done. The power is in the doing, not the scale. A walk around the block can be as transformative in the moment as an hour-long workout, because it's not about the calorie burn or the distance. It's about shifting your mental state. Small, accessible actions are also easier to repeat multiple times a day, and frequency is a huge factor in how quickly you can change your emotional direction. When practiced intentionally for 3 days, microactions not only lift your mood, but also build momentum toward bigger changes. What starts as a short walk could turn into a daily exercise routine. Writing 3 gratitudes could evolve into a full journaling habit. Calling one positive friend might lead to surrounding yourself with an entirely more supportive social circle. This is how small shifts compound into life, changing results. They don't feel like a big leap in the beginning, but they quietly set the stage for a transformation that feels natural instead of forced. By focusing on microactions, you bypass one of the biggest traps in personal change, the all or nothing mindset. You don't have to wait until you have the perfect plan, the perfect mood, or the perfect amount of time. You simply take one small, deliberate step, then another and another. Each step interrupts the negative spiral, creates proof of your ability to change, and builds the momentum that carries you forward. Over 3 days of consistent microactions, you begin to feel a shift not just in your emotions, but in your identity. You start to see yourself as someone who takes control rather than someone who gets swept away. Your destiny is not a random accident, and it is not determined by the circumstances you were born into. It is shaped moment by moment by the state of mind you choose to live in. Most people believe that big external events are what define their future. A new job, a relationship, a sudden opportunity. But the truth is, the future is quietly decided in the small, repeated choices you make about how you think, feel, and respond right now. The emotional state you carry becomes the lens through which you see the world, and that lens determines the actions you take, the opportunities you notice, and the risks you're willing to embrace. If you consistently choose a state of fear or doubt, you will unconsciously shrink your world, avoiding possibilities and reinforcing limitations. But if you choose a state of confidence, gratitude, and resilience, you will naturally expand your life, attracting situations and people that align with that energy. Think about two people facing the same setback. One sees it as a dead end, the other as a challenge to overcome. The difference isn't in the setback itself, it's in the state of mind each person is operating from. The first person's destiny narrows because they stop trying, assuming nothing good can come of the situation. The second person's destiny expands because they look for solutions, they take action, and they refuse to see the event as permanent. This is how a single choice of mental state can create entirely different futures from the same starting point. When you make a commitment to deliberately choose your state, even for just 3 days, you start to see how much control you actually have. The world might still throw unexpected challenges at you, but your reaction to those challenges begins to change. Instead of falling into the same old patterns of frustration or hopelessness, you pause and ask yourself, what state do I want to operate from right now? That question alone can stop the automatic cycle of negativity that has been directing your life without your awareness. In that moment, you are no longer a victim of circumstance, you are a conscious creator of your future. Your state of mind doesn't just affect how you feel in the moment, it affects the quality of every decision you make. Decisions made in anger, fear, or despair tend to be short-sighted and reactive. They focus on escape rather than growth, on immediate relief rather than long-term progress. But decisions made in a state of calm, clarity, and confidence tend to align with your bigger vision. They move you closer to the life you actually want instead of deeper into the patterns you're trying to escape. This is why protecting and choosing your state is not a luxury. It's essential for shaping your destiny. What most people don't realize is that your emotional state is contagious, not just to yourself, but to everyone around you. The way you carry yourself influences how others treat you, the opportunities they offer you, and even the way they speak to you. When you show up consistently in a state of positivity and determination, you draw people in. They feel safe investing in you, partnering with you, or trusting you with greater responsibility. On the other hand, when you operate from a state of negativity or defeat, people instinctively withdraw. They may not even be aware of why, they simply feel the weight of your energy and choose to avoid it. Over time, this creates a ripple effect that either opens doors or quietly closes them, all based on the state you consistently project. Choosing your state is not about pretending to be happy all the time. It's about emotional leadership, the ability to guide yourself into the state that best serves you in the situation you're in. There will be moments where you feel tired, discouraged, or afraid. But in those moments, you have the power to ask, is this the state I want shaping my future? If the answer is no, you can make the deliberate shift. That might mean taking a deep breath, recalling a past victory, or focusing on what's still within your control. Each time you make that shift, you send a message to your mind that you are in charge, not the emotion. Over the span of days, weeks, and months, these small shifts compound into a completely different trajectory for your life. The opportunities you notice will be different because your mind is primed to see them. The people you attract will be different because they resonate with the energy you bring. Even the way you interpret challenges will be different because you'll see them as stepping stones rather than roadblocks. This is why two people can live in the same environment, face the same difficulties, and end up with completely different results. One chose to guard their state, the other let circumstances choose it for them. Every great turning point in life begins with a choice about how to show up in the present moment. You cannot control every external factor, but you can always control the internal one, your state of mind. That choice determines the tone of your thoughts, the strength of your actions, and the resilience of your spirit. It's the difference between reacting to life and designing it, between drifting wherever the current takes you and steering your own course with intention. The moment you take ownership of your emotional state, you take ownership of your destiny. Over time, the person who chooses empowerment over resignation, clarity over confusion, and action over passivity will always create a future that reflects those choices, because the state you live in today becomes the reality you step into tomorrow.